расщелин и впадин становится свет, в темноте беспощаден. Облака неподвижно глядят вдалеке на свои отражения в реке. А поезд идет, и железо поет, знает железо всего пару нот. Пробирая до дрожи, лишая покоя, под железной кожей бьется сердце живое. Вперед! Над водной гладью, а где-то лежат его старшие братья. Их ржавые туши, искореженный лом, их двери распахнуты в крике немом. Боли не чувствует ящер железный, но тоскливо его монотонная песня. Навстречу деревьям, навстречу туману, пока бесполезным не стану. Поезд идет, и железо поет, знает железо всего пару нот. Пробирая до дрожи, лишая покоя, под железной кожей бьется сердце живое. Вперед летит и поет, сбивая росу, превращенную в лед. И слова этой песни написаны красным, в небе закатом недавно погасли.
The book is titled Iron Sings, and the title comes from one Russian song, which is performed by Flёur. The book includes drawings of Artorias and the lyrics of that song. The lyrics are not placed in chronological order. That is, the first time the lyrics appear is not directly tied to the beginning of the song. When listening to that song, you would have to constantly turn pages, and thus you'd go through the entire book several times per page listening. I did this for a variety of reasons, partially because I wanted to convey the feeling of uncertainty and the abstract kind of situation. The story itself is timeless. You would have to return to the start and the end several times. However, it is cyclic in a way that is too abstract to be direct, to be directly, understandably cyclical, which is in itself a parallel to the character. And the song tells a story of a train that travels through the world. The story is obviously in Russian, but I've included translations in the video and probably in the description as well. I translated the song lyrics from Russian myself, and I took some artistic liberties in that, and some of them were used directly for this book. The book contains the lyrics of the song in its entirety, and throughout the entire song there is a parallel that I make between Artorias and the train that is the main character of the song. And when translating the song lyrics, I tried to make them sound even more morbid than they probably did in Russian. There is a moment in the song when she sings about them traveling through the forest and over the bridge, and remembering the train's elder brothers. And then she paints a picture of their carcasses covered in rust, broken, twisted scrap. They're opened doors, just like mouths that cannot scream anymore. Or maybe they scream, but in a way that is mute. The song still makes you feel uneasy because the train very certainly sings that he wants to go meet the trees, meet the fog, through everything that they send him through, until he becomes completely useless. Another point I wanted to mention is the colors I picked for the book. There are no midtones, only black and white. I consider that there are two layers to that story. The first one, the obvious one, is the relationship between Artorias and the Abyss. It is somewhat illustrative. It is something that you could read out on your own. The second layer comes from the parallel of black and white thinking. Nothing in life is as black and white as history tends to make it. And I consider that book somewhat a reference to how easily history, and specifically Artorias' story, can be misinterpreted. Thus, the second layer of a story comes in when we realize that the story of our train is not said from first perspective, as in we hear a person describing the story of a train to us. So if we take the train as a parallel to Artorias, it would mean that the story presented in the book is not of his own making. It doesn't have to include his own viewpoint. What inspired this book was the notion that there is still a living heart beating under the skin of Iron. You can read him as a hero or a loser or a savior or a pawn, and he can be whatever you want him to be. I love the notion that there is perhaps intentional painting over the layers of his own character. There are people who would want him to be different, there are people who want the story to be different, and there are people who paint the story different, which somewhat shows through that book, as in it depicts Artorias as something abstract, as something that wouldn't have to have a character in itself. It wouldn't have to be a person in the first place. For the situation demanded that there would be someone to fulfill a certain role so that the story could progress. I see Artorias as an image, as an icon that was placed there but was completely open to interpretation. Speaking about the mediums for a bit, all of these drawings were made in the computer, so the book in itself is very still, very even, and doesn't offer much in the sense of tactile feelings. So I decided to compensate for that with the cover of the book, for which I originally used a certain type of paper that would fit the two-tone narrative. But then I scrapped that idea, and I decided to paint over the covers of the book. And there is a part that is covered in black, and the other part is covered in white. you need to bring out the differences between the paint sorts, because white paint tended to be more stoic, more hard when dried out, while the black became somewhat gluey and sticky. All in all, I wouldn't want to talk too much about the story and the images that I chose, because I want to leave some space for interpretation. But I would also love to hear your comments or ideas or maybe interpretations. Maybe this book or this medium or this speech inspires you or makes you think of something. I would definitely love to hear that, and I would definitely love to communicate with you more. I think it would do us all good. Thank you.